Back to the channel. Today I finally got my order from Hellcat so I could finish up all of the front suspension on the Hellcat station wagon. So I have been working with Hellcat for about a year and a half, and I have a discount code for you guys. Link is in the description with the discount code. Check them out. Anything that you need laser cut, bent, tapped. They now do studs. They powder coat, anodize. It's crazy how much stuff that they do that they didn't do before, and it's just very, very convenient. So go check them out. I have used them to build all of the all-wheel drive system on the Hellcat station wagon, but we have the front shock forks. So I need to weld these to the BC coilovers, and as I said before, I was having a huge issue finding something off a factory car that would work. And now I just have something that I made, and we'll get these welded on there. Everything will go together really easily. I can finally mount this to the lower control arm and we'll be 100% ready to go. I also had them bend me, I designed and had them bend me the fuel pressure regulator bracket for the Hellcat station wagon. So this bolts to the back of the coolant transfer tube for the supercharger. Then you'll fuel pressure regulator bolts to that, and then everything is nice and centralized, so it's not just sitting on that bar on top and you don't see a bunch of fuel lines going everywhere. Plus, the more fuel lines you have running around your engine bay, the hotter the temps of the fuel get, because it's just surface area. So then it makes all the fuel lines going to the fuel rails the same length. You don't need to see the fuel pressure gauge on the fuel pressure regulator. So the Hellcats have the fuel pressure sensor in that back line, but then you just replace it into the fuel pressure regulator, and then you just plug that in, and then the ECU sees it. I think if you want to see it, you can add it to your display inside on the center console. But let's head over to the junkyard, get this stuff finally busted out, get these welded up, and get everything on the front ready to go. And this means the car can finally sit on the ground under her own weight. Subscriber Aaron Rue keeps coming through, and him and his brother got me some more misalignment spacers. So these in here are to replace the rear ones. So there was an issue with the company that he found to make me some, and they ended up making them out of just something that wasn't stainless. So we have the ones right here, and he took care of it big time. So him and his brother, big shout out to them. These things are awesome. I also test fit the fuel pressure regulator on the bracket on the engine, and everything fits perfectly. The sensor that comes out of it right there comes out right in the center of the AC line, so it's gonna work out perfect. Then what I'm gonna do is just make an adapter harness that goes from the Dodge, I'm pretty sure both of these are Bosch sensors, but from the Dodge Blade style to the GM Bosch style sensor. So then I could have everything just plug and play. This is the fuel pressure regulator off the FD, but I'm gonna be running dash 10 and then dash 8 out. So, and it's gonna be a little bit newer of a upgraded regulator for the new style 3.5 gallon Aeromotive pump. But I really like how this came out. So I'm probably gonna end up offering these as like either a sheet metal one, or I'm gonna design a billet one and kind of go from there. But yeah, I think they look really nice. It just bolts right onto the back instead of having to like drill it into that top bar right there like everyone does, and then all the lines are running all over the place. It just doesn't look that good. Plus, all the lines get hot because there's more surface area. So let's, I need to go grab some spacers so I can finish up the lower control arms. I now have everything ready to get these forks for the front coilovers tacked on and welded on to the BC mounts. So all these do is slip over here, and what I'm gonna do is actually mark this and cut this nub off because I really don't need it, and it's gonna also be secured by that slip fit, and then it's gonna be welded on the top, and it's gonna be really nice to have something that just works out, and the axle is gonna clear, and I'm not gonna have to worry about any clearance issues. So like I said before, when I was fitting all this up in previous videos, the offset was a little bit weird. I would have had to push this forward to have it centered on the axle, but then it would always have stress on the upper perch mount, plus the spring wouldn't be 100% seated on that perch mount. So that's why I have this offset bracket. All-wheel drives being different strut tower wise compared to the rear wheel drives, but the strut towers and all the front sheet metal comes up as the same part number, so I'm really doubting that at this point. So let's get these tacked in for right now. I'm also gonna make a tab, most likely come off of this, so the sway bar can pick up off of the coilover instead of being off of the lower control arm, which will be a really big improvement over the whole design. So let's get this cut off, get this tacked on, fit it, then get the lower mount added, which it's gonna be something like this. I might actually make this a little bit wider and use some polyurethane bushings, but let's get this done really quick first. I ended up deciding to MIG the coilover tube slash fork for the axles myself. So I was gonna have Hayden TIG them, but I'm pretty decent at MIG welding. It's not the best, I guess, but it's also not horrible. So I'm about the same. I was about the same with my MIG and my TIG, but I haven't TIGged for so long. I'm probably pretty rusty. If I had a TIG welder, I've been saying this, I need to just buy one and then I could do all this stuff myself and not have to drive to Fort Collins. But tomorrow I have to go up there anyway to drop off some stuff, and it'll just be convenient. I need to get some tires for the Hellcat, and then I could use the tires off of the Hellcat on the other two Trackhawk wheels. So then when the car's ready to go over the alignment, I can get everything aligned all on the same 305/35/20s and we'll be ready to go. I should have the headers, so I talked to American Racing Headers to see if they would send me a driver side header just tacked together, so then I'll have the passenger one, it'll fit perfectly, but then the driver side one, if it's tacked and anything happens with it interfering with the steering shaft, then I could go ahead and modify it, cut the tacks, modify it, and then have Hayden weld that up and it'll be perfect. So that should be coming, those headers should be coming this week or maybe next week depending on shipping, but get those, get the long tube headers on this thing, get the steering shaft done. That's the last thing on pretty much the headers, the steering shaft, these lower control arms welded up since I already did the strut tubes or the coilover adjustable tubes. I don't know what you call those, the lower mounts, but since those are done, we just have the lower control arms to TIG up, and I probably should just MIG them, but we'll get them TIGged, we'll get the rest of the stuff done, get the headers on there, and finally, then I can do the rest of the exhaust, connect it to the Magnaflow exhaust, and we'll be ready to throw the front bumper back on here. To do the headers, I'm gonna have to drop the engine back down, which will be good because then I'll do the rest of the wiring like I said before, since I know the length of it now, and I'll put all the AC lines in and everything will be 100% together, ready to start up, and she'll finally be off the lift. I now have the coilover mounts all the way in there and made sure that pretty much the maximum travel of the suspension, if it ever gets this high up, it's not going to interfere with the axle, and I think we're in a very good position. So I'm really happy that all of this is coming together. Now I need to tie this into the lower control arm, and like I said before, I'm going to remake this lower control arm out of billet eventually, but for now it'll be perfectly fine. I just want to get this thing running and driving and actually under its own weight, so I can finally set the coilovers to the correct height and just kind of move forward. So you can see that axle is at like 18 degrees of angle right there, and hopefully I'm running this axle around like 10 degrees or maybe 10 to 12. Eventually I plan on moving the diff further up as well once I do the dry sump system, so then I could come up with a diff probably around 1.5 to 2 inches, which will greatly affect this axle angle. And the only reason this axle is at such a kind of steep angle right now is because the suspension is all the way maxed out. You can see it up there. But on the passenger side, the axle shaft is a lot longer. So even at that increased angle, it wouldn't have any issues. It would be a lot shallower of an angle. It's probably going to be, since that one all the way compressed is going to be like 18 degrees or something, this one's probably going to be half of that because the axle is like twice the length. So let's get everything buttoned up. I now have the front lower control arm coilover mount to control arm finalized, and I really like how this came out. I just put these little triangles here, boxed it in. I think it's going to be perfectly fine for the time being. I don't think I'll have any issues, but like I've said before, I want to remake this lower control arm and billet. The same thing with the rear, same thing with the knuckle, and get everything so the suspension geometry is in perfect orientation. So for the time being, it's going to be perfectly fine. And I really like how all this came out. I like how this mount, but what I should have done was this 45-degree bend here should have been going this way. This bar should have been on the other side, and everything would have been a little bit better just with this mount. But I think it's going to be perfectly fine. We need to get everything welded up. This welded, this welded. I already MIG'd the back of that, which came out really nice. And then I need to add this right here to pick up the sway bar. So as you guys remember, I have that Audi sway bar. That tucks up perfectly. I really like how that came out. I'm gonna have to make a sway bar end link. So this is gonna bolt on like that, and then this top part is just gonna twist so it mounts to this coilover mount. And then everything is pretty much in stock Hellcat suspension geometry with that mount picking up off of this. And as you can see, they come off the backside about the same amount, which will be really nice. And I'll just do the same thing as the Hellcat and make that out of a bar. So I'll just have it twisted, and I think it'll come out really nice and just kind of have it kind of seed like that as well. But I also need to, when I make the front lower control arm and the rear lower control arm out of billet, I want to make the knuckle out of billet to fix some of these suspension geometry issues, which they're not that big of a deal. And I have the suspension all the way maxed out up just so I can make sure everything was going to clear and these coilovers are going to have enough adjustability. So this sits about here, which you want all of this front lower control arm, this pickup point for the steering to be as level as possible when the suspension is compressed. But the Trackhawk knuckle is an SUV, so this is about 25 to 30 mil shorter. So on the Hellcat Challengers and Chargers, this pickup point for the lower control arm sits this much further down. This sits about here, and it just improves all the suspension geometry because this being further down moves it further away from the hub, which also helps with the axle clearances, which I don't have any real issues with clearance, but I want this thing to perform well. So in the next video, I'm gonna drive up, have Hayden weld up these control arms, finish welding up these coilover mounts, and then we'll be 100% ready to come back, get all this stuff cerakoted. So I'm gonna probably cerakote this, cerakote that. I need to cerakote, I don't really need to, but I'm gonna cerakote the knuckles, I'm gonna cerakote the rotor hats, then I need to cerakote these because this one got pretty crispy and the other one is kind of dull. And then I have brand new hubs for the front over here. So we'll put these on and just get everything in the front, suspension wise, all buttoned up. So I'm very excited and I can't wait to get those welded up, get them cerakoted, get them finally on the car. Like I said before, big shout out to my subscriber Aaron Rue and his brother. They keep just helping me out with the channel, with the builds. You know, they've been making parts that I've been needing, and it's very hard to find companies to make them. So like I said, they made all those misalignment spacers. They all came out great, but I'm gonna end the video here. If you like these videos, make sure to click the subscribe button, thumbs up, throw a comment below. As always, see you guys next time.